Yes, dear. Here's Dawn.
Hey guys,
Hello.
y'all hear me
Morning.
okay? The our power was flickering about 45 minutes ago, so let's hope that it holds out for us. Oh, hey Holly. I'm gonna give everybody another few minutes to get on. Krista, you're cracking me up with your busted ass camera.
I told you, Maud.
Maud. How's the puppy this morning?
He's good. Potty training a puppy in this weather is not fun.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they love that.
Well, he's fine. It's me.
Oh, my dogs are like, no thanks.
No,
Guess who's got a meme to reference? I'm sure you've seen the meme. It's like dog looking out the window and it's raining and it says, well, guessing I'm going to shit in the house today.
he seems to be pretty easygoing, so it's me that's having a problem with it.
Okay, well, hang in there. I was going to give Ginger's coming. I wanted to give her a minute to get on because she had specifically asked on Tuesday if we could talk about multiple offer things. So while we're waiting for her to jump on, does anybody have anything in particular they felt like they wanted to talk about today or go over?
Yeah, I've got a question, Doug.
Okay, go for it.
So I feel like I've seen this, or maybe it's happened to a couple of us. Like, what happens when the same lead kind of gets passed to two different people? Like, who ends up like getting it? I've been in a situation where like, one of my leads like re-registered and somebody else got it, but I had it, and I don't know. I feel like that's happened a couple times.
So yeah, that will happen with Boomtown because people register and then they register with another email or their spouse registers and somebody's communicative and somebody doesn't. It's basically the person who's actually makes first contact and then is actually working with them. You know, we've had people, it happened a couple years ago where, you know, we had one person talking to two people on the team. It's like you couldn't tell that we're both with the same company, or we've had spouses, one's talking to one and one's talking to the other. So, you know, if somebody gets agency first, that's who the lead goes to. It doesn't matter when it was registered on the website. It's all about who's actively engaging with them, and whoever gets agency first. I hope that clears it up. Now, we did have an instance a week or two ago, which was my fault, where I think I transferred a lead. I sent Holly a realtor lead, and then they messaged again, and I had failed to assign that lead to Holly and realtor. So then I sent it to someone else. In that case, I just told her I owed her another lead because that was on me. But that, I mean, that's a pretty rare occurrence that happens. The Boomtown thing, it does happen. And especially people who have been at the coast longer, I know they've seen it happen a few times. There's not really anything you can do about it. What I would say is one way to maybe work around it, and Brandon, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, if you add a spouse's email to an account, can they create another account? They probably can because it's not primary.
Yeah, they can. So I try to get their spouse, figure out who the decision maker is, make them the primary account, and then create an account for their spouse, link those two accounts, and then I just trash the other spouse who isn't really involved, but it's just kind of like window shopping. That way you got them both roped in.
Good question, Julianne. I hope that answered it.
Holly, are you at the hospital?
No, my son's therapy appointment. We're on a break.
Oh,
So we're just in the lobby. Like,
Therapy. Appreciate the level of dedication, Holly. Thanks for being in there. We'll try and get started with some stuff so you can get some benefit out of this.
I just have to say,
thanks
I'm really
everybody for jumping.
excited. My first listing got the clear to close yesterday.
Oh, that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So Ginger, you had asked Tuesday that we talk about multiple offers. So I want to make sure that we answer any particular questions that you have. For the benefit of everybody real quick, I just want to make sure that I do share, hold on just a second, that I do just point out that on the resources page, we do have a couple of multiple offer discussions from the last 6 months or so as all this stuff has started happening. So everybody, if you want some insight and just to hear some good discussion, you can check those out as well. But that's not going to stop us from having a discussion today. So have at it. Let's go.
Well, I guess, you know, the frustration that everybody gets into is, you know, trying to find your buyers a home and how to, I mean, because we don't have a crystal ball, we don't know what other people are offering. And you hear things like, you know, other people's terms were better, and you try to get creative and think outside the box, but maybe other people are more creative than you. And I saw that little, I guess, a parody video, whatever you want to call it thing. I think I shared it with you, where the lady was, you know, laughing like, no, you didn't get it. The other people offered them a pony and a beach house or whatever it was. And it's just like, you know, what do you have to do? What are some things that people have tried to do that have worked for them, that made their offer stand out? I don't know if anybody has anything.
So let's start with the basics, and then we can let people kind of chime in with what they've done in their experience, right? Just to recap for everybody. Obviously, it almost always comes down to the price, but it's not necessarily just the price. So you got to set the expectation that, hey, in this market, things are selling above list price. We've been on the market X amount of days. Things are selling and coming soon, et cetera. What's the second thing? Well, that's going to be due diligence. And why is that? Well, it's non-refundable. The seller knows right away that they get that, blah, blah, blah. It would also be a short due diligence period if there is any earnest money honestly, unless you get an older agent who's insistent on earnest money doesn't matter at all. So you're not even going to have an earnest period, right? Or a DD period. You would just make the DD period the date that end the day the contract's executed. So effectively, you're already past it, which doesn't matter anyways because there's no earnest money. Above and beyond that, what are we looking at? Asking for minimal personal property, if anything, although you can usually tell whether or not they're planning on that to convey. No closing costs, no warranty, quick closing. Those are the absolute basics. So let's talk about things above and beyond that.
I've asked sellers, obviously, what's your ideal closing date? Or sometimes I'll just put seller to choose. If they need seller possession, yes or no, who they want the attorney to be. I've also given my clients the option, obviously, North Carolina is as is unless otherwise negotiated, but if there's a property that's fairly new, I would say like within the last 5 years or so, give my clients the option, hey, this is relatively new build, young house. Are you okay taking this as is and just get inspections for knowledge purposes? Yes or no? My guy did
Explain
that.
what that looks like though, Janine. How
Okay.
would you actually go about doing that?
Right. So obviously the offer to purchase says you're buying the house in as is condition, right? And so my guy, it was a 2017 build. He was totally fine with buying it as is. He put down a good amount of DD. We let the seller choose everything else. And I just wrote in the email, here's our offer. They're very interested. He's taking the home as is. Inspections will only be for knowledge purposes. And we won the house. And of course, the inspection report had like, I don't know, one thing on it. And he's like, no problem. My wife's dad's a roofer. He'll deal with it. Not a problem. You know, so that was one thing, you know, that I recommended, gave him the option to do it. And he said yes. That was a Jacksonville market. He went a little bit, he went over, it didn't appraise, but I had the conversation from the beginning. Hey, your house is listed really high. She's like, I know. I said, are you open to the conversation? She said 100%. We signed the gap addendum. It came in 15 low. They reduced by 10, called it a day.
Any other thoughts? I would say in addition to, and I've used this myself, if you're going to say as is, which as Janine pointed out, every home in North Carolina is as is, so ours aren't required to fix anything. I have filled out the due diligence repair request
Yeah, I
and put
did
in there seller to, or buyer to request no repairs and send that over with the offer.
And I did that. And then we were like, I don't know, 4 weeks into it because the seller needed a longer close. And she was like, so at this point, are you asking for any repairs? I was like, we're taking the house as is, remember? She's like, oh yeah, okay. Well, like my beach house too, we were in multiple offers. It was a 2015 build. My guy took it as is. He's not even getting a home inspection. I'm like, okay, dude, you do you. But yeah, he went over and took it as is. So
Just to
And then-
make sure everything's properly documented so they feel good about it. Yeah.
correct.
Absolutely.
And like with that agent, I asked her to have her seller sign the DDRA and she was like, well, technically the contract says as is. So unless you need this for your compliance, we're fine. I'm like, okay. So the seller didn't sign the DDRA.
As long as everybody's on the same page with it, that's fine.
Yeah.
I would, in that case, I would still have our clients sign it and just save it in the loop as evidence that they requested nothing. So I would use that as a best practice. Even if you tell the agent that's what they want to do and they say, we don't need the due diligence request, have your client save it, put it in there. And then when you submit the loop to April, you can just let her know, hey, this was why it was done this way. That way she understands why there's an incomplete document in there.
You don't mind
I
just
had,
going,
I had one
sorry.
that I thought, I was very creative with, but it didn't work out for me. But I had, like they wanted an August 2nd close date and spoke with the lender. We could close as early as July 20th. So we offered to close on the 20th, but let the owner stay in the house till their desired close date free of charge. You know, so they could have their money from the sale and
Not have to pay the mortgage.
right. And I was like, well, I was kind of proud of myself on that one, but you know, it wasn't enough. I mean, I think in this price point, when you're looking at between, 220 and 3, you have, at least here, we have investors coming in with all cash offers and they're just swooping in and taking everything.
That's how I
So
lost.
the thing is, you did it really well though, Ginger, right? You asked what they wanted, or you found out what they wanted, and you tried to give them something that works. Now, that doesn't mean it's always going to work. The thing is, at least you used that avenue to win it. I'm sure it just came down to price. And there's nothing you can do about that, because as much as somebody says, hey, we want one date and hell, you'll let us stay for free. Well, that free might not be worth the $10,000 extra the other offer is doing, right? Or they might be willing to wait another week to close, or inconvenience themselves and not have the closing date they want for the extra money. It always comes down to the big picture. Brandon was talking about offers on a property he has last night, and we're not going to talk about specifics, but it was like, okay, so we've got X over here, and then we've got X over here, and one is better here, and one is better here. What do I do? And I said, well, this is what I would recommend. Show them the most they can net and the least they can net among all the other terms, and then have them pick, well, what's their level of comfort, because it's a little bit of a gamble if there's an appraisal gap addendum involved, right? So say you've got somebody offering here, but no appraisal gap addendum, and then you got somebody offering here, but an appraisal gap addendum. So where could it end in here? You know what I mean? So it's about helping them understand this is the most you could get, but this is also the least you could get. And then you've got one guaranteed here. So which one do you want to go with?
The appraisal gap addendum you're speaking of, that's just the appraisal addendum that they're making up the difference, right?
No, there's also a gap addendum that says they're willing to pay X amount above an appraised value. That's the gap addendum. We have addendums that say buyer will do everything.
I guess I wasn't familiar with that one.
Yep, it's
So
in there.
Yeah, I've seen it, but I didn't ever open it. I don't know why, but I was just like focused on that appraisal addendum, buyer makes up the difference.
Well,
So the gap,
I don't think the gap addendum is very strong, honestly.
It's really not.
I've got, I'm not going to get into terms here, but I got 8 offers on this listing. 6 of them have appraisal addendums, and 5 of them say we'll make up any gap. And then 4 say we'll make up any gap. And then there's 2 that say we're willing to bridge a gap of up to X. Well, my seller immediately says, well, I'm not fooling with them. I'm in control here. We're not going to leave this up to the appraiser. So I don't think the appraisal gap addendum, unless you've got some other terms that are extremely strong, I don't think the appraisal gap addendum is really attractive in this market.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely different there than it is here, because I had on my listing in Hampstead, I had 0 appraisal addendums with any of the 8 offers that I got. So just depends.
Yeah, it just depends on what you have.
I think representing buyers a better time to use the gap addendum is if you've got something that you feel like is overpriced, that's been on the market a while, and you're not in multiple offers, or maybe there's one other offer that you're aware of. It's more with like an unreasonable seller who thinks the property is worth more than all our comps are telling us. It's not a good multiple offer document. That's just to protect your buyer kind of document, because that's how sellers are going to react for the most part, I think, just like Brandon said, when they see one of those. And me representing a seller would say the same thing. Why leave it up to the appraiser? And that's why I told him you got to show them the most they can get, the minimum that they could get, and what's guaranteed at least in the middle, based on what we know right now. So.
But what buyer is going to sign an open-ended appraisal addendum unless they got shit ton of cash and don't care?
Well, I mean, the ones that have a shit ton of cash and don't care.
They're
That's
there
signing them
plenty-
here.
They're signing them left and right here. The other thing to consider,
Open-ended,
Janine, is you don't have to have a shit ton of cash to do this, right? If you're planning on putting 20 or 15 or 10% down and the home doesn't appraise, well, you put 3.5 or 5% down and you use the additional cash that you were going to use for your down payment to make up the gap. Nobody wants to do that, but people have to do that right now. Obviously, that's
Yeah.
not the deal with every single house, but if that's what you got to do to get the house that you want, are you willing to do it? Or right now, a lot of people are saying yes.
The other
Well,
thing
it's
too
just-
is they don't have to perform on it necessarily. If the gap is too big, then for their liking, they can eat the due diligence or whatever
And
money they have
borrow.
out.
Correct. They
Or you
can't
can use it for leverage because albeit, you got it under contract and you have a gap that's high. If you find out what the seller's circumstances are, and like, hey, they need this to move on to the next house. I mean, I'm not saying do what you do, but you can
Yeah, you got their
leverage
ass.
that to your advantage and say, hey, look, I know you're contingent on another house, so do you want to play ball or do you want to like put this back on the market again?
Nate, I
Yeah,
agree
but on the other
100%.
hand, I've got one due diligence and we're gonna probably have an appraisal gap. We have a 50,000 in due diligence, so we still got the upper hand as sellers.
Yeah,
Well,
sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
Right.
Yeah,
Nate, if
really-
you have that information, yeah, you absolutely. It's our job to use it to the benefit of our client if we can, for sure.
well, and that's why in this market, we also have the gap addendum or the addendum to protect our sellers to go out and say, look, we're not going to allow you just to arbitrarily throw $20,000, $10,000 over list price to win the offer and then try and come back and
Yeah.
renegotiate it later. And if you won't agree to sign that, your due diligence is going to be really high, or both of those, because there are ways to prevent, because that is a legitimate way that people have done it in the past. I think you can't do it as much now because these addendums have become so familiar. to
Well,
people.
if you have a
But they-
competent
but
listing
ha-
agent and they get a ridiculous over ask with no appraisal addendum, and that buyer's not willing to make up the difference, like, come on.
Yeah, the first thing we're asking is proof of funds because that's happening. And yeah, if you've got an offer that's ridiculous, we like it, but what are you gonna do? You gotta show us that you're gonna actually make that offer close.
can do.
Realistic.
Right.
That's a
Yeah,
great point.
Krista's exactly right. If you get an offer that's $40,000 above list price, even if they sign the appraisal addendum, I got your proof of funds or your pre-approval letter. I've got your appraisal addendum. That's all well and good. But now I need you to show me that you've got $40,000 cash to bridge this gap if you have
Right.
to.
Yeah.
And if you can't produce that, then your offer is not as attractive because I'm not confident that you've got the money if you need it.
Right. All really good points. And this is coming from both sides of it, but hopefully it helps you representing a buyer understand the conversations that listing agents are most likely having with their sellers. Amber, were you going to ask something earlier?
It was just what you started with. So if we don't have, if we just do due diligence, there is no need to have a due diligence date, correct? Is that right?
Correct. There's, I would just advise you write in the box date of contract or effective date of contract. So it's just not
Okay.
blank, because some
Because-
agents will have issue with that. Also, some agents will have issue, and I think most of us have seen this, not doing any earnest money, even if you're doing ridiculous amounts of due diligence money. So, just make sure that you're on the same page with the agent with that.
I had
and
an agent, she's like, I don't know how to put this in MLS. I was like, and then she had made me go back and edit it and put the date on the contract. So she had something to put in MLS for due diligence date. It's like,
Well,
okay.
especially a lot of agents who have been, agents who have been around a long time and agents who haven't. The last 6 to 12 months, we've seen a lot of unprecedented stuff. So everybody's dealing with all these different addenda out there that are all made by all these different attorneys. I hope they're made by attorneys. That's why I got Jeremiah at least put theirs on letterhead, because a lot of these don't have any reference to any attorney on them.
Mm,
And
we're not supposed to.
we are not allowed to prepare anything like that. They have to be attorney prepared. I think NCAR really missed the boat by not doing that when they updated the documents this year by not having some sort of appraisal addendum formally provided by the state. But it is what it is at this point.
I got something on an offer that I received from my listing tonight that I'd not seen or heard anyone discuss before, and that was, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot of money, but I mean, it could add up if you're doing some other stuff. They offered to pay the seller's excise tax and the seller's HOA transfer fees. It's going to wind up to be about $1,200. Not really going to seal a deal, but if you're looking for every little kernel you can throw at somebody to get their attention and sweeten the pot, that's something that you could think about doing. The rent back, I think, is still one of the best things that you can offer if the seller is looking for that. If they're building a new home and they're not going to close until the end of August, give them a free rent back until the middle of September so that they can take their time, to move comfortably. That is still, to me, other than the money, that's the best thing you can do.
Brandon, did you say pay the seller's excise tax as well? Did you say attorney fees as well?
No, but I mean, theoretically, I think you could offer to reimburse them for pretty much anything. This was the excise tax and the HOA transfer fee. There's like a $300 HOA move out. So they have an addendum that they've had an attorney sign that they will reimburse them for those charges and things of that nature.
I've heard
Okay.
other agents in like bigger markets or other states have that, Brandon, have like done that for their clients.
Really?
I think, and Brandon and I were talking about this last night. In my opinion, that's just very psychological. It's like, oh, they're paying my closing costs so I'm already paying you $15,000 over list price, but now I'm paying a $300 HOA transfer fee and your $1,000, attorney fee. I mean, sure, but what if I just pay you $1,300 more for the house or whatever?
Right.
It's all about what they net.
6 1, half dozen of the other.
But however you can explain it to the list agent so they can tell the seller, hey, they're covering X, Y, and Z. Maybe that resonates better with them. You never know. There's more than one way to convince them. All the warm and fuzzies you can give them. Yeah, we're taking care of everything.
Has anyone ever heard of the BRG or the relocation package? I've got someone that's interested in one moving from Washington, and they're moving state to Wilmington, and it's called a buyer's relocation, BGRS. It's like a 5
Probably a
pages.
company, if seller's company is acting as the seller,
Yes, I think that's
Yeah.
what it is.
you just have to ask the listing agent. I had one like that. You have to go through all the forms that they provide because it's like a third party.
Okay.
They're acting.
It's a
as the
lot of forms.
seller. Yeah, just call the
Amber,
listing
if you'll
agent.
send that to me, I'd like to take a look at it just to make sure I know what you're working with.
Perfect. Thank you.
Those things can be tricky sometimes
Yeah,
too.
they're confusing.
A shorter due diligence period is still attractive to a seller, even if you are doing earnest money. I realize a lot of people are not doing due diligence periods right now. In the event that you are, obviously the shorter the better. I'm just trying to think of anything else. I think we've touched on a lot of the stuff with the appraisal, the rent back, no repairs. There are people that are, Ginger, I did this last night. I don't really like doing it, but it's not what I like. It's what the client wants to do. Sight unseen offer, unfortunately, I think it's crazy, but there are people that are doing that. And so that's an option that buyers have, and where I'm seeing a lot of people making sight unseen offers is, if you really want to live in X neighborhood and you've lost 3 or 4 times in X neighborhood, some people are like, well, shit, whatever pops up in there, that's what I'll do. I'll figure it out. So, I've done that 2 or 3 times with Glenwood North, a townhome community in Raleigh off of Glenwood. So that's another weapon. Not a lot of sellers right now actually are entertaining as many sight unseen offers as they were 3 or 4 months ago, because the thought is, well, if you'll go ahead and give me $15,000 over list price now before the door even opens, what are people going to think when they can get in here and see it in person? But there are sellers that are doing that right now because they don't want to deal with showings and things of that
Mm.
nature. So
Good point.
again, it's not about what we would do if we were buying. It's about
Right.
what the client wants to do to give themselves the best opportunity to get the property that they would want. I would never write a signed unseen offer for myself.
Hell
But
no.
if my client wants to do it, as long as I explain to them the risk involved with that and they're okay with doing it, all right, I'll have it to you in 45 minutes. Get ready.
To your point about the short DD though, like, I get that, but appraisals are taking effing forever. And so I don't want to have to go
Yeah.
back and deal with, okay, seller, I need you to extend DD because I've got earnest money on the line. I feel like just
Well,
put the 3 weeks and say, hey, due diligence is this week, so I have time for appraisal because we know they're taking a long time.
Right.
Honestly, I've never had pushback and I've done 3 weeks, but I get exactly what you're saying. I just don't want to have to go back and ask for an extension for DD because of an appraisal issue if there's
Sure.
EMD on the line.
Well, and it depends on all these are case by case situations.
Sure,
Right?
sure,
If you're doing an appraisal addendum, who cares? It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what your due
Right,
diligence date
right,
is. You've
right.
already foregone that. If the home's been on the market 10 or 14 days or longer, it's been sitting for a while, no appraisal addendum is involved. Obviously, that's a different thing. You probably don't need a shorter due diligence date to make your offer more attractive if the home has been sitting on the market for a long time, right? Because obviously they don't seem to have a whole lot of juice going on it other than you. You never know that for sure, but it can kind of stand to reason. The other thing to think about is so much of this stuff, we set the expectation for this in the buyer consult,
Mhm.
right? So it's so much easier to get people to do what they need to do to win if you tell them right in the beginning. And I don't want to speak to your market because we're dealing with a lot of the same stuff, but it is slightly different. Right now, I'm telling everyone that I'm meeting with, if you want to look at a house that has just come on the market, if it's the first 2 or 3 or first 2 or 3 days or first week on the market, if you are not prepared to spend at least $10,000 in due diligence and go at least $12,000 above list price, you do not need to look at the home. Right now, I don't know what those numbers translate to what you guys are dealing with, and maybe it's not even the same. I don't know that, but so much of this is setting the expectation that that's what I got to do for a house first day on market, first weekend on market. Okay, I'm willing to do that because I know what it takes to win, right? Once you start having those conversations, at least for me personally, it has gotten so much easier to get people on board with doing that because we've set the expectation on the front end that that's what it's going to take. You're going to have to agree if you're going after a house the first 2 or 3 days on market. If you're not saying, hey, I promise I'm going to pay you whatever I offer you, if you're not comfortable doing that, that is okay. That's fine. I don't blame you, but we're not looking at the house because I'm telling you right now, your offer's not going to be strong enough.
Mhm.
And sometimes depending on the
Be list
client,
price.
sometimes they just have to lose before
100%.
get a reality check of what they have to do. Cause yeah,
Make sure
before they
you have
take
the
you
opportunity to
seriously.
tell them you told them so without having to say, I told you so.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have a question. What are y'all thoughts? Okay, let's say you've got 10,000 in DD that they're willing to put up. What are your thoughts about putting like 1,000 or 2,000 of it in earnest money so that you actually have a due diligence period that you can make short? Do you think that could be more attractive because you've actually got more money on the line after due diligence, or do you think that's just kind of a waste?
Are you saying decrease the 10 or add to the 10?
I'm saying decrease it, but not by a lot, but by a little to make it where you can actually have a real DD period. But
In my
a
opinion,
short
that's
one.
going to come down to how well the listing agent can explain it
Yeah.
to their seller, to be
Yeah,
honest.
that makes sense.
Because the due diligence is all that matters. Why wouldn't you want everything guaranteed up front? Why would I want $1,000 in earnest money and 9,000 in DD if I can have 10,000 in DD? Right?
Yeah, because
With talking about the due diligence or the earnest money or due diligence dates earlier, and for appraisals, just keep in mind that VA and FHA appraisals take a long time, but your earnest money is protected. So who cares about the DD date when it comes to appraisal? You don't need to for that reason for those loans. So we're basically talking about conventional or USDA. So just keep that in mind. It also comes down to loan type when you think
Correct.
about some of those appraisal dates and for some of those issues. I mean, I think your strongest bet is always going to be put it all on due diligence and just, you know, it is what it is. Hopefully at some point we'll get back to due diligence and earnest money and 3-week DD dates, and appraisals will be done in a timely
No
fashion.
expectation for appraisal done.
Right, and every 9 out of 10 homes won't sell in the first
Yeah.
48 hours. But this is where we are right now, so
Meredith,
hopefully we've got a lot of tools.
I've asked the agents, like this house I wrote on in St. James, it's like, I don't know, the 400s. I was like, do you want DD and EMD? They said, yes, they want both. I'm like, okay. So my people split it up. My beach house, she's like, don't even write EMD. I said, fine. So he put a shit ton in DD and took it as is. So I think that if you just ask the agent what they want, that'll help you less having to negotiate back and forth and just write it at the first time.
Make such a good point, Janine. It's about, and how many times we talked about winning the other agent. Obviously you want to connect with them and show them that you want to work with them and that you're attentive to what their sellers' needs are. Make sure you're reaching out and asking those questions. Hey, we know you want the most for the house. What else do you want? Is it high DD? Is it DD and earnest money? Is it a particular closing date? Do you need possession after closing? What is it? You know, what can we do above and beyond the purchase price to give your sellers exactly what they want? And some agents will be like, I'm so glad you asked. They need X, Y, and Z. And some agents will be like, just show me the money. You know,
This
some sellers are in
relocation,
a hurry. You know, they don't need to get out.
Yeah.
They'll sell when they can sell, and they'll take the most they can take, and they'll be flexible with their time frame regardless. Some people are building a house and they got to get out and they got to have the money by X so they can pay it by Y so they can move into their new house. So try and get the backstory. Amber, go ahead.
what would be the reason why this relocation one, he said there's no due diligence. Why would they do that?
Some they just don't do any due diligence. It depends on that. I want to see the documents. If it's a relocation company that owns the house and that is selling it for the seller, like they've taken it because the seller took a job and moved and they're handling the transaction, a lot of times they won't do due diligence. So I need to see it to make sure I understand exactly what's going on.
Okay. Thank you. I'll send it to you now.
Okay, I'll let you know after the meeting. I'll take a look at it.
Yes, sir.
What have we not covered?
For sale by owner. No.
Well, that's a completely different ball
Yeah.
of wax.
That may
Hopefully,
be. actually
sale by
easier.
owner, you're not involved in
I was
multiple.
thinking the same thing, Brandon. That's a good next
That's
topic.
probably easier because they don't know to expect $20,000 in due
Right.
diligence. They have no clue. They haven't talked to anybody.
Yep.
And hopefully there aren't as many eyes on the property and you don't have as many people lined up making offers.
No multiples. Let's get some buyer possession. Let's write an additional provisions to fix the Louvre. Let's go.
Yep, let's go. Take advantage. Any other questions?
I think one thing to just keep in mind of when you know that your client is in a multiple offer situation and you're writing, what would you want if you were advising the seller and explain to the buyer, if I was selling this house for the seller, this is what I would expect in this market. And so I'm going to advise you of that. Now, whether or not you want to do that or you have the ability, or that's something that only you can answer. But based on my experience and what I'm seeing every single day, if I was representing the seller, this is what I would be looking for. So here's what I advise you to do.
I have one
And
other question.
sell
about-
that as your value too, real quick, Janine. Sell
Yeah.
that as your value. I also work with sellers. So I know what sellers are looking for in this market. Now, that doesn't mean I can tell you the exact amount, but it does mean I can tell you the things that we can try because they may be looking for them. And I can ask the listing agent, hey, what is your seller looking for? Is it X, Y, and Z? How would they respond to X, Y, and Z? Go ahead.
Have you guys, one of the things that I've found that's been a little bit frustrating for buyers in multiple offers is obviously they're anxious waiting to hear back from the listing agents. And if they say due by X, or you reach out and say, hey, can we expect a response? Because this burned me. Can we expect a response by X time? Yes, okay. Like, obviously, sellers can risk the buyer backing out if they're taking too long to respond. But at the same time, like, if that's the expectation that you're setting, we should hear, but the agent said we should hear by this date, and then it doesn't, and they get frustrated. Like, how are you guys dealing with the response times from agents, listing agents?
I
I
mean,
mean, obviously
think-
nothing that you can control.
I think you just have to set the expectation up front to the buyers that, you know, it's really kind of at the mercy of the listing agent in a sense, because, and I know what you're saying, because some people don't operate like we operate either.
Right.
So
Frustrating, let's be honest.
it is frustrating, but you just
Yeah.
you just have to set the expectation to them that they got to be patient, because it's really, you know, and then the other part to it is too, you know, explain to them that sometimes there are legitimate reasons why it could take longer than we know
They're out
that
of
that's
town
not
or
always the
working.
case.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just forget to even let people know that they didn't get the offer, which I think is ridiculous, but it's happened to me. Like, you go
Or they're
on,
shopping you and waiting for a higher one or whatever, but
Doesn't
yeah,
that suck when you find out on the MLS that the property is pending and you never got an alert?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
so bush league.
completely
I
unprofessional.
walked out of a showing the other day and it was pending, and I was, are you freaking, like, I just wasted my time showing this house, and I walked out and it was pending. Like, that was just,
Yep. I think Nate's right. First of all, life happens. People are busy.
Yes.
Most people are working. It takes time to sit down and talk about this. Also, you know, set the expectation. You know what? We know they had a lot of traffic. They probably had a lot of offers. It takes time to go through these. Not all offers are cut and dry, black and white. You have to really look at the particulars, like we were talking about, gap addendum versus no addendum. If you've got some fly by night listing agent or lender that you've never heard of, right? We should be vetting these pre-approval letters on our top offers, speaking to those lenders to make sure their finances are good. If they're going way above and beyond on list price, right? We want to look at their cash statement, cash to bridge a gap. What, did you just get assaulted? What just happened?
he's got this damn, he's working from home today, and he's got this.
I think you're making really good points. It really comes down to, you know, even if a list agent says we're taking all offers by 5 and we'll respond by noon on Monday, it doesn't mean that necessarily happens, and it's not necessarily the listing agent's fault. And we've talked before about, hey, if we're going to set a time frame, sellers, we got to promise to deliver by then. But that doesn't mean it's going to happen, because you get older clients who aren't computer savvy, and then you got to drive your ass over there and print all the documents and show them to them. And you've got 6 offers, and you got to put it on a spreadsheet, but now the spreadsheet's so small they can't read the numbers. So you got to explain it to them, or something like that. Or somebody gets called into work because they work in the hospital and there was an emergency or something, and somebody called out. You know, life does happen, people, and it's very frustrating when you're expecting something by a certain time. I would just say, when you reach out to communicate, just be like, hey, we understand life happens and we might not get the answer by the time we wanted, but please don't let me find out that we didn't get it because I see, you know, it's under contract in MLS.
And that's something else, not just for necessarily offers, but I guess it took me a little bit to realize, like, probably because I wasn't, you know, writing as many contracts as I was in the beginning, or now as I was in the beginning. And that's that, you know, if you look at it from, you know, their lens, the other side's lens, y'all know how crazy this business is. So you got to be patient, and for us too, on everything really nowadays, because it's so like hectic trying to juggle everything. You know, your client is waiting for the answer on that one offer, where, you know, there's several things that agent's dealing with and that you're dealing with. So it's all, you know, patience. You just got to put it up front and let them know, like, it might not be instantaneous. Yeah, they said offers will be in by, must be in by 5, but that doesn't mean you're going to hear back at 6.
Right.
They said offers are due at 5. How many times have we been like, hey, I'm working on this offer, can I have it to you by 5:30? Well, somebody else is probably doing that, right? So, you know, you got to keep that perspective. A lot of what we talk about today comes down to setting expectations, also setting a good example. If we're not calm, our clients aren't going to be calm. If our clients aren't calm, we don't need to mirror their anxiety. We need to help calm their anxiety. That's why we're the professional. So you got to really work on that. Also communicating with the list agent to find any other avenue or any other thing in particular that the seller is looking for that you can offer in addition to these other options we talked about to your buyer, and then saying, okay, here are all the cards we know. Here are all the tools at our disposal. Which ones are you comfortable with?
And whatever you do, don't tell your clients calm down or relax.
I keep in mind all the stuff that we are talking about that we hate: waiting on an answer, finding out the property is contingent or pending on MLS. Let's make sure we're not doing those things when we're listing properties, right? We don't need to be guilty of all the stuff that we're complaining about. One thing that I forgot to mention that I've done, two things I've done, and I've had success with them before, not every single time, but I asked the listing agent straight up, what's it going to take to win this house? Can you tell me? Is there a dollar figure? Some of them will give you a window. Some of them won't tell you anything, but they can't say no if you don't ask, right? It's like anything else in life. The other thing is I will pull all the listing agents' MLS entries over the last 60 days and look at the ones that have closed. And I try to find out how many percentage, what the list price to sales price is. So I can say, hey, this listing agent stuff typically sells for roughly 9% over the list price. That's in the last 2 months. Can't guarantee it's going to do that, but historically she's pricing things as to where they're selling for 9% above list price. Any bit of information you can show to your client to help them get to a number that you think is going to give them a better chance to be successful is worth running a report. It takes 1 minute.
And that I've done that
really
too. Like, what's it gonna take to win this house? And I'm like, they look at you and it's like, well, I don't know. Well,
that's okay.
yeah. Like, my people want the house. What's it gonna take to win tonight? Let us know. Give us a counter, something.
But if you do that 5 times and you get one agent that says, you know what, they just want to wind up netting 260. Well, reverse engineer the numbers and there's your answer. Let's write it up. If you ask that question 5 times and one person tells you, you just got a contract.
Yeah. Just because it always doesn't work doesn't mean it's not worth asking. At the same time, you know, if I'm working with the seller, unless they specifically say we need X, Y, and Z, I don't have an answer for you. It's not my decision anyways.
Right.
All right, we've covered a lot and we could probably keep going, but I think some things might start to get lost on people just because we've bounced around to so many great aspects of multiple offers, and on both sides too. I think the perspective of being able to explain to your buyer, you know, if I was representing the seller, these are the things that we're looking for. So let's kind of think about things that way, in addition to the information I can get from the list agent. You know, all those things really, it's putting together a puzzle, and, you know, it's not going to happen the same way twice. So hopefully what we've talked about will be helpful, though. I think it is, because these are the things that, despite the fact that we've lost a lot of multiple offers, we've also won a lot of them too. And somebody's winning them. So just make sure you're giving it your all and your people understand what their options are. All right.
Thanks.
Have a great day. I'll be talking to some of you guys. Let me know if I can do anything for you. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Hey, Nate,
Bye.
your listing looks great.